for purposes of introduction. This was a commission appointed in accordance with, committee appointed in accordance with the charter. The charter designated 3 individuals. One was the mayor, who was here. One was a representative council, which is Councilman Ahmed, and you were appointed by Council President. And the third was an appointment from the the Government Study Commission, the Home Rule Study Commission, which was an appointment of the chair. And Mr. McGran, you are here on that behalf. So that's the full committee, and everybody's present. And we can note that in the minutes from a roll call perspective. I do think it makes some sense just for running meetings that we have you guys elect one of you to be the chair of the transition committee and take me out of that role, because quite frankly, as you'll see for the rest of this meeting, I'm going to be doing a lot of reporting to the committee over the course of the year. At this point, would one of you want to serve as the chair, and then we can take a vote as you may deem appropriate?
I'll agree to serve as the chair. I want to isn't exactly the right phrase, but I'm happy to do it.
I make a motion to appoint Mr. McGran as the chair.
All in favor?
Aye.
With slight opposal from Mr. McGran, but we'll take it.
That's fine, yeah.
And if you like, I can continue with the agenda, or you could take over tonight.
I would prefer to have you run the agenda for today's meeting.
Very good. So I thought it would be helpful to sort of review as a start the responsibilities and obligations of this committee that are set forth in the charter. And the transition committee is really governed by Article 13 of the charter. The committee's charged with having quarterly meetings to receive reports from city staff assigned by the mayor and city council to draft the necessary ordinances, rules, and regulations, with the goal of having them adopted by city council as soon as practical after the effective date of the charter. Keep in mind, the effective date of the charter is January 1st, so we are 28 days into that. There are some outside deadlines, and 2 of those, which I'll talk about in a little bit more detail, are the drafting and the adoption by city council of an ethics code within 12 months, and the drafting of an administrative code by council, again, the adoption of the administrative code by council within 18 months. The goals of city staff are to have those to council in plenty of time to adopt them within 12 months each. And that's really the outside obligations of the transition. The biggest sets of those is really going to be the administrative code. At a minimum, the administrative code has to contain an enumeration of the departments, offices, authorities, boards, commissions, and other administrative units of the city government, their scope of responsibility, and the internal procedures for their operations, budgeting, accounting, and other financial procedures, purchasing and acquisition procedures, and policies and procedures governing personnel policies. It sounds like that's not a big task. I can tell you I've started working, and I'll report later on where I'm at, but I've started working on a table of contents, and the table of contents is 5 pages long, and it's not complete yet. So the best way to think about this is it's basically your operating laws. Right now we operate under the third-class city code, and we are trying to craft basically a redraft of that meets the city of Lancaster's requirements, how it operates, consistent with the Home Rule Charter, and with appropriate checks and balances to make sure that the systems of government operate effectively. So it's a large task.
And just to clarify, the transition committee will not be responsible for reviewing and adopting the administrative code. That will go to city council.
Correct.
But just to clarify, it is the transition committee's responsibility to make sure that work is moving forward.
Correct.
Within the time frame that Barry just laid out.
Right. So, and the second set of principles and policies or rules and regulations is that ethics code, which again has to be adopted by city council. It is supposed to be adopted it is supposed to be drafted with the input from the Ethics Commission. An Ethics Commission is required to have been created by the charter, which consists of 7 members. those 7 members are appointed in a variety of ways. 2 members by the mayor, 3 by council, and 2 by the controller. So in addition to reporting on the status of those 2 items, myself and other applicable staff will be reporting on certain other things that help facilitate the transition from our third-class city, optional charter law status to a home rule status, and they include creating training programs for all the incoming elected officials elected from 2025 and on, implementing qualifications and procedures for vacancies in elected terms in office. So we have the general rules that are set forth in the charter, but now kind of the more in-depth policies for that, implementing all of the budget and capital requirements of the charter. Those are sort of the big topic items that we'll be working on and then reporting progress to the committee on over the course of what I hope to be no longer than the next year.
And what was the third one?
Implementing the budget and capital budget requirements of the charter.
Yep.
So, any questions kind of on the basic role of the committee under the charter?
Just to make sure I understand this, in terms of, where to the mayor's comment and just in general. So I understand that adoption of the final results are the responsibility of city council.
Mhm.
So when it comes to the flow and discussion at this meeting, it really is, primarily and or exclusively for the purpose of monitoring progress.
Correct.
Okay. And so then my question comes back to then, if we have the public at these meetings,
Mhm.
are we, are they going to get, like, if they come to this meeting expecting this to be where those things, where the content is being discussed, we're going to allow them to make that public comment, but they're kind of making those comments to the wrong body.
Right, and
Right.
I'll talk about how we're going to get some of this to council and to the public for more input
Okay.
as
Right.
we move forward here. But
Right.
this committee is really to make sure that the work is getting done.
Yep.
Not to be necessarily drafting and doing the
Yep.
work.
Okay. Right.
And one of the reasons for that is, administration has lots of other things to do. So
Mhm.
the city council, they're the legislative body, it's
Right.
sort of the watchdog from the charter's perspective, just to make sure that the work is progressing.
Yep. Okay.
So,
And
But
I would just say that for us, it's also, and because you are on the Home Rule Study Commission, John, and it is to just make sure that all of the i's are being dotted and
Mhm.
t's are being crossed. And, I have a lot, very confident in Barry in terms of like making a list and like making sure that we're getting all of the things done that we need to get done, but that's also just part of this.
Well, and the reason that's on my mind, one is to make sure that, I mean, maybe to just make sure we say today, that as this unfolds, that we, find opportunities to make sure that that's clear to the community, so that if they do have comments on what we're working on, that they are making it at the right place where they can actually be making those comments. And then also, I feel like, I'll probably along the way, I know that some of the other commission members had some comments about, there was a lot of discussion along the way about whether some items belonged in the actual charter or were more appropriate in the administrative code. So I want to make sure that, for anybody who left that process with opinions about that they also, know that, that I give them an update and say, hey, we're getting to work on this. If you were one of those commissioners who had, opinions about things, just monitor what's going on at city council so that you can make sure that you're getting, to something that satisfies you.
correct.
Yeah.
And I'll get into a little bit how city council will get this and when they get,
Mhm.
there's obviously a lot to draft and what's the starting point. So
Yep.
I'll explain a little bit about what my goals and objectives are, the plan that we've come up with to get this process moving, and so that input can be had. And keep in mind that the charter does have a provision, particularly I believe it's in the ethics code, that there has to be a public workshop on the ethics code in advance of its adoption. So, and with administrative code, again, that's a legislative act. It's an ordinance, essentially. It's going to require, multiple skins, and we're going to talk, it's not going to come in one piece because there's just too much. So we'll talk a little bit about that here in a moment.
Yeah, and I can give an update as where we are with the Ethics Commission and its formation.
Yeah, and I was about to do that, but I'll defer that to you. If you
Okay.
like.
We have been receiving applications. As you know, there's a list of individuals that is publicly on the website. We hadn't received very many, and so had been doing some more social media outreach and outreach to partners. Just, hey, we're really trying to identify people who meet these criteria. If you have folks in your networks that you can recommend. So we do have a number of candidates now. I think
It's 19.
19 candidates. And so I'm going to be reaching out to our controller, James Reichenbach, and to council president to discuss the process in which we want to appoint members to the Ethics Commission. And then once we have a process down, we'll begin reviewing the applicants and making determinations. Each individual person can determine who they want to be on the Ethics Commission. The only criteria is the criteria to apply, which is that they can't have held political office, they can't have be part of a political committee, and there's other things, but otherwise it's really an independent appointment by council and the controller and I. So council gets 3, the controller gets 2, and I also select 2. Council president will need to have a conversation about how she wants to handle the council appointment, and she, I believe, has the opportunity to just do that herself, or do they need to be voted
No,
on by council?
that would be council, so I don't believe it's council president.
Okay.
City council is
Right.
the charter language.
All right, I just want to be clear about that. So then it would be council voting on the 3 appointments.
Correct.
So we'll have to discuss how we're going to do all of that, but I expect that to come in the next couple of months. It won't be February, but hopefully by March.
I would like, because, members of the public to understand a little bit, there's also a process to get on this registry, which is a little different than
Yeah.
some other boards and nominations. So the charter required that we have this registry where people can either nominate themselves or be nominated. City staff worked to make that sort of an online platform to do so. And of the 19 people have been nominated themselves, and some have been nominated by others. The system works so that when you're nominated by somebody else, it automatically sends correspondence to the individual nominated to ask, are you interested in being considered for the position? It vets the applicants to assure that they've met the preliminary guidelines. So you can't continue in the process on the registry if you haven't met the guidelines that were already set forth in the charter for being on the commission. So the goal here, it would be to have them appointed, in enough time that they can then meet and start formulating concepts and proposals that can be considered towards the drafting of the ethics code.
And for this body, to make sure that we're keeping the timeline moving forward, is there a cutoff date for when folks could be nominated or nominate themselves?
I think that's the next question, is that that's a question that we're going to discuss with council president and James, like, is 19 enough to select 7? It's a little bit more than 50%.
Yeah.
And so do we want to continue to keep it open? Because when originally, I think at the end of the year, I think we only had like 7 people, and so, or even less than that. And so we needed to at least get twice the number, that feels like
Yeah.
at a minimum, we should have twice the number of people nominated than we're selecting from. And so is that enough of a pool, or do they want to continue to advertise?
I should know this, but I can't remember. Is there a term for service on the Ethics Commission?
I can pull it up. That's Article 12. I don't remember it off the
You
top
didn't
of
bring
my
the
head.
copy I sent to you?
Probably in there.
So initial terms are going to be staggered to ensure an ongoing process of new
Right.
commission members. So that'll be something that actually the three, in terms of the initial terms, that's part of the discussion the mayor needs to have with Mr. Reichenbach and council as well, so that we can, and that'll be part of the admin code as well, is what is the terms of ultimate terms, and my suspicion is it's 2 or 3 years in general once you're on, but there's got to be a sort of
But there would be-
evolving.
But, and I guess where I was going with that is, so once this initial commission is established, some people there will be a need to designate new people every year or two.
Right, and the registry will have to be maintained to follow that process.
And the registry will have to be maintained and opened and closed periodically for that purpose.
Right, I think that the general concept is to essentially keep it as an open registry for people that are interested in case there's a vacancy as well,
Okay,
so.
so it might, so it might stay open,
It might,
probably some housekeeping,
I think, you're going to have
periodically make sure that the people who are on it want to
Wanna
continue to
stay
stay on it.
to, or haven't moved out of
And,
town, or
or
whatever.
right,
Showing up to-
Yeah, I think that we should
And-
probably establish a procedure in which there's an expiration date, like we have a list, the list is good until X date, and then we start a new list.
And is that something that the Ethics Commission could do once they're impaneled?
No, I think
Or that
that'll
would be-
actually be part of the admin code.
Okay,
Yeah.
So, I mean, one of the topics that has to be covered in the admin code is the procedures and policies for appointments to boards and commissions.
Okay.
And we have general
Yeah.
guidelines on that in the charter.
Okay.
With the Ethics Commission, which is a newly appointed commission, I think that's going to be council as a legislative act determining how they want the Ethics
Okay.
Commission to be.
Right. okay, that all sounds good, thanks.
So I did want to update you on a bunch of things that have been happening administratively with respect to the charter since its election by the voters in November and ultimately becoming effective January 1st. So there were some things required by law and best practices that needed to be done. We've sent certified copies of the charter and the study commission's final report to the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development, which is in accordance with the Home Rule Charter Law. Certified copies of the charter have been sent to the newly elected president judge of the Court of Common Pleas of Lancaster County, and we'll be sending those with his direction now to the magisterial district judges, so they essentially can take judicial notice of the new sort of operating charter, and to the extent, because if you recall in the charter, we've elected to have the commission and the citizens have elected to have the third-class city code continue to operate to the extent it's not inconsistent with the charter. And city council's adopted an ordinance and the charter provided that all of the current ordinances stay in full force and effect unless otherwise adopted or unless otherwise inconsistent with the charter. We wanted to make sure, obviously, that the court realizes that even though those ordinances were all adopted when the city was a third-class city, operating under the third-class city code, that they remain in effect. So that was relatively, seems minor, but relatively important task for continuing to be able to enforce the ordinances that are in place. We were also required to and did have the charter inserted into our codified code at the head of the code. And ultimately, when the administrative code is adopted, the order of the code will be, first thing you'll have is the charter, and then the next thing will be the administrative code. The charter also requires that essentially the solicitor's office develop a training program for newly elected officials for the city. So that would be mayor, council members, and controller. I and some help from my team have started developing a list of topics that would be on that, and we're starting the work of figuring out the best ways to put a training program in place so that those elected officials get a really good understanding not only of the charter, but the laws that they're supposed to be dealing with and the practices and procedures that govern them.
This is a really great opportunity to institutionalize this process of making sure that new council members understand sunshine law and some of the other governing principles of what it means to be an elected official, in addition to having a checklist of topics for a future incoming mayor of what kinds of things they need to understand in terms of, collective bargaining agreements, employment law, our Public Utility Commission, the role of, how taxation and rate setting processes occur. And so Barry just showed me the list recently, and it's a lot, and I wish I would have had it.
Yeah.
So we'll be reporting on the continued progress of that as well. And in all honesty, I think it works well that as I work through drafting an administrative code for consideration by council, it'll trigger sort of the thought process for the topics that need to be on this list as well. And so doing them sort of contemporaneously and not one at a time, I think is really going to work to our advantage to make sure that we have a thoroughly thought out training program. And so, as part of that, I do want to talk a little bit about what I've been doing for the process of the administrative code, and to lay out for you a little bit of the time plans and processes that'll be going on. I already mentioned that the kind of 5 major topical areas, but as I said, those 5 topical areas really develop into a table of contents, and it's not complete yet. That's already with just broad topics at 5 pages long. It's going to be, a rather lengthy set of what many people would say were like ordinances that would come in pieces to council originally. So how do we do this? Like piece by piece is untenable to some extent, and one time is untenable to another extent. So from a timing standpoint, our goal is to basically present this in 2 parts to City Council. That gives City Council lots of time to continue. That doesn't mean they have to adopt it right away, because we're going to wait to adopt the whole thing at one time, but to start giving them the pieces to consider and then to get feedback back to me on where and questions answered and the public. And the first tranche really coming in late May, and the second tranche coming in early August. Those are the goals right now. And again, keep in mind that, as you recall, John, most municipalities, when they adopt home rule, put 18 to 24 months. The Economy League recommended 24 months. The commission went to 18, and the mayor has asked me to do it in 12. So, I'm kind of laying out that there's a reason for the time. It is going to be the operating law by which the city operates. And so one of the things that I have as a goal is to make sure that the same thoughts and considerations that were given to drafting a third city class city code and an optional charter law are given here. And those things are checks and balances, right? So the charter itself is very good and clear about, there are checks and balances built in between the administrative divisions and the legislative divisions, right? The executive branch, for lack of a better word, and the legislative branch. And laws are meant to make sure that the public is protected, and that council and the administrators are all sort of working in a relatively under a relatively similar set of rules and regulations that guide with principles that are set forth in the preamble: transparency, accountability, and the goals of the city. And the key here is, how does this city operate? That's what the third class city code didn't do, because it was drafting it for any third class city, right? And so The goal here is to create a document for council to consider that maintains checks and balances, but is uniquely crafted to meet how this city operates with the teachings and education that the commission received during the home rule study process. What I've started doing, I've had multiple discussions with the Pennsylvania Economy League, with other solicitors regarding sort of best practices and topics for consideration. I've reviewed and analyzed a large number of administrative codes adopted by other home rule municipalities. There aren't a lot that are recent. As you recall, this doesn't happen regularly, so, again, there's a lot of things built into older codes that might have changed based on time, but they're still really good to review. It's sort of opened the eyes. I have the vision of the city. I've been involved with it for a long time, but opening my eyes to see what other places have done. I will be looking at sort of similar things from other states, just for ideas, not necessarily for that's the way to do it, but again, to open the box. We've asked staff to start identifying areas where existing provisions of the third-class city code and optional charter law have presented operational challenges. Not that the law is bad, but where it's, look, if we didn't have to follow this step, we could short-circuit it. Would this make us more operationally efficient? We'll judge those in comparison with the checks and balances we just talked about. But it's important, again, that's part of the crafting of this to how we actually operate versus what a third-class city code that was drafted originally 50, 60 years ago and readopted in, I think, 2013 or 2014, was thinking about for all of the third-class cities in the Commonwealth. We've gone through the third-class city code and optional charter law several times. We'll be doing it a whole lot more. It's like 100 pages, so it's a very fine print, but for well-written and conceptually necessary laws to provide those checks and balances. So, I'm looking at at the language that's in there and the laws that are in there. Like, okay, when they talk about personnel, what do they mean? When they talk about pensions, is that something that needs to be here? What do we have? If we're talking about appointment of an official, like their language, why did they, and really giving some thought to why they've drafted it the way they did with the procedures they did, so that we can make some suggestions and proposals to council that have the same sort of thought process and vetting.
Can I ask a question, Barry?
Sure.
During the home rule process, there was a decision made early on by the study commission that instead of starting from scratch, we were going to use the third-class city code as a template, and that we were going to ostensibly tweak the existing third-class city code to meet the needs of the city. Is that a similar way that you're approaching?
Yes.
Okay, just to say
It's not trying to start from scratch, but it is really trying to narrow it and craft it to meet our needs.
Fix.
Right. Yep.
One of the other things is we've done a comprehensive review of all of the city's boards, commissions, and authorities, and started looking at, we know there's some operational challenges with that many, we have 31, and I think maybe now 32 with this one.
Yeah.
And 33 with this one. It's not a board and commission of council, but it's still a board, commission, or committee. And ways to maybe think about how some of their roles and responsibilities can be consolidated to maximize the effectiveness and the roles of people serving. And so there'll be some recommendations that might come with that as part of this.
And efficiencies, because every one of those board, commissions, and authorities has a staff person that serves as the liaison. And some of them meet very, very infrequently, and some of them are, some we think can be consolidated because of just the similar kind of work that they're doing, like appeals work, or potentially eliminating them entirely because there's no work but they have been hangovers for some reason or another.
So, and the last kind of topic that we've started dealing with is, unlike the third-class city code, which really doesn't address personnel The optional charter law essentially requires that the charter, the home rule charter law, that there be a section on personnel policies. And the way we're doing this to start, at least, is looking at all of the city policies. And we have policies that go from very general to very specific, right? So what are the ones that really need to be codified as an administrative code, and what are the ones that need to be left to the HR department and staff to change periodically as laws change, as time changes, as needs change, to try and create that sort of personnel section here. So these are some of the reasons why I can't just hand you a code, hand City Council a code in a month or 2 months, because of the level of work that needs to be done. I anticipate that I'll be seeking advice from multiple sources as we get to things, and we get through parts and parcels. But that's the plan at this point. We've been doing a lot of work to date in the first 28 days of the month, and obviously a little bit even during December after the charter was elected. But that's where we're at to date. I will tell you that I have internally a Gantt chart that I've created to monitor pushing myself towards getting sections drafted. I'm on target with my Gantt chart. I didn't anticipate doing any drafting until, quite frankly, the middle of February. I'm actually a little ahead of it in some places. Probably not to the surprise of the mayor, but maybe to some other people's who don't know me might be their surprise. But I don't expect there to be problems with meeting the sort of the timeframes that I've suggested here for us doing the work, which is that 2 tranches kind of, and the way I view the first tranche is going to be a lot about all of the officials and appointments, elected officials, organizational structure, departments. That I view as really the first tranche. Some of the other things, like the personnel parts of it, I view more in the second tranche. That's not his area that's in the code, so it takes a little bit more fleshing out. And
regardless, even though you're going to present it in those tranches that you described, it'll only be adopted one time at the end of the process.
Correct.
Okay.
But the point being now is, you were asking, how much opportunities are going to be for the public.
Right.
You can see there's going to be quite a bit, right?
Yeah.
So it's council can elect, once it receives tranche 1, how it wants to proceed with suggestions, but it's there to the public. Now the public can be making comments and suggestions once we have it. So, I've left, if I get the second tranche in early August, we had 18 months. If our goal is the end of the year, we've left quite a bit of time for iterative work with the public and with council.
And we recognize that there's going to be certain sections of the admin code that are going to be more, going to require more discussion and are going to generate more interest from the public than other aspects that might relate to the nuts and bolts of procurement or, things like that.
I said this, I think, several times at the Government Study Commission. It's not often, if you are intellectually challenged with the process of making law, it's not often you get to be at the ground level of starting with a constitution, right? So a unique opportunity to have been part of the process for the city to adopt a home rule charter, and now another chance to be at the ground making level of drafting sort of our administrative Bible, the law that will govern us. Keep in mind that all of these, and the Government Study Commission knows this well, that we can only do what is not unallowed by the Constitution and or what hasn't already been covered by general legislation of the Pennsylvania Commonwealth. So it's still not a wide open a foray as we might like, but there's a lot of flexibility to be able to develop self-governance here.
Okay, great.
And that, I think, really concludes, my report on where we're at to date. And, on the agenda, John, all we had left was public comment.
Right. Yeah, so, I guess I'll sort of step in is there, any more comments, questions, feedback based on what we heard from Barry?
I thank you for the report and, letting us know all of the work that has been done. But if you could just one more time go over, what is the mission of this body, so that we know also, because there's the public may be thinking we're the ones who are, writing the code at these meetings.
No, your job simply is to meet quarterly. That is required under the charter. And your role is to facilitate the transfer from the third-class city form of governance to a home rule form of governance by receiving reports from city staff and council on the status of that work. That is it in a nutshell. You are really sort of the eyes to hold city staff accountable and to be able to hear reports. And so you do serve as sort of this body to take reports that the public can hear as well on where we're at with these things and what the next steps are and where they're going to be. Ultimately, the administrative code has to be approved by council. The ethics code has to be approved by council. Ethics commission members have to be appointed, as we've said, some by council, 3 of them, 2 by the mayor, 2 by the city controller. The ethics code requires a public workshop conducted in conjunction with city council prior to its adoption. So city council is going to be tasked, as we get closer to getting them sort of documents to review. I'll certainly report out to them directly, but they're going to be tasked with figuring out what their process is going to be for how they want to review this, study it, have additional public comment, that type of thing.
And then is it going to be the job of the committee here to have the administration and council come report back quarterly to us, or we're going to be inviting council president or department directors to come report?
At this point, it's really mostly a staff-directed process.
So it's not a job of the chair or of the...
No, your job is, we've already advertised the 4 quarterly meetings.
Okay.
Please come.
Your job is to come and to, if you're not satisfied or you think that there's things that aren't being thought of, to certainly let those that we bring before you.
If there's been something that's been inadvertently omitted, then that is part of the job. But it's really just, in my mind, I think about the transition committee as being the committee that ensures that the administration is carrying out the directive of the people who voted for a new constitution.
Yeah.
And that job falls to the transition committee to ensure that that happens. And I think it's good that it's council, there's a liaison to council. You can report to council that you had your first transition committee meeting and update about when council is going to start seeing aspects of the code and serve as that liaison. And John, you can do the same to the Home Rule Study Commission, just so that they also know.
Yeah, give them some updates so that they understand how it's going to go. If there's issues that were important to them to see followed through, when can they see that, available for public review?
Yes, and to come to council meetings or other workshops that are had. And then my job is really to make sure that, internally that we're getting the job done and to support our team in doing so.
Yeah, to make sure I'm doing my job.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Other questions?
No.
Okay. Anything else from you?
No?
Okay, I'm good as well. So I'll open things up for public comment, if there's any public comment.
I guess my only question was, could you guys walk through the appointment of the Ethics Commission again and kind of re-explain what the nominees are open on the website?
There's 7 members who get appointed, 3 by council, 2 by the controller, 2 by the mayor. There's a public registry that's been open on the website since December. It's from that registry that members must be selected. The mayor will select whom she wants in the way she wants. The controller gets to select who the controller wants in the way the controller wants to do it. And then council's going to have to select 3 in the manner that council elects to do so. Once they're once they're appointed, their roles are set forth in the charter as to what they're required, what they may or may not do, and what their responsibilities are. But the primary one to start is going to be to provide input on the things to be included in an ethics code. We'll start work at some point on creating a basic ethics code. The study commission saw lots of them during its process, but nonetheless, it doesn't make sense to draft it, to start really drafting significantly until that group is put together.
And was the expectation to put the group together by March?
March or April.
Okay. Thanks.
Anything else from the public? Okay, then I think we can, is this make a motion to adjourn, or is this I just adjourn the meeting?
I think you could just adjourn.
All right, we are going to adjourn this meeting. All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Barry, this is,